Honestly, I wish there was a story about justice. I can only think of stories about injustice because that's just the world that we live in. I mean, if there were so many stories about justice, I think, yeah, we could just end because we've solved it, right? Like we've solved the problem. If you look at the situation of women, there are more inequalities now than there were before we went into the pandemic. The impact of pandemic was in many ways worse on women because they were on the front lines and caregivers, but also a lot of them had to take a few steps back in terms of their economic independence, their political independence, because the COVID-19 measures such as the lockdowns forced them all to retreat back into their homes. I mean, even if you look at something like the rates of domestic violence, they went up almost fivefold in most countries all over the world because people were shut down in their homes. So, I mean, rates of domestic violence just increased. Justice has been on the agenda for some time now. It's been on the agenda for governments, the UN, like all of these people have been talking about justice. But for so long, the conversation has really focused on reforming institutions, reforming laws. And there really is an absence of data on what people need and what are their demands from justice. And I think that is the first challenge that we need to address. I started my career working directly with people who suffer the worst violations of access to justice. And what I see that's so shocking is that these people are missing from these boardrooms where all of the decisions are taking place. So we talk about making justice more people-centered, but what that should mean is actually talking to the people who are going to be impacted by these decisions that you're going to be made, but also for whom you are making these decisions about justice. We need to come out of these boardrooms and actually go to the people and firstly understand, okay, what is the experience of justice for you? Like, what is justice for you? Taking that conversation out of the courtrooms, out of the parliaments, and taking it to the people, into their homes, into their neighborhoods, and understanding what their needs are. So we need these localized interventions that really draw from the experience of the survivors. And once we have these, I mean, I think we're able to make a huge impact. If you set targets in The Hague about how many cases need to be resolved, how many convictions we need, I mean, that's not the problem. Like, what we need to understand is what these people want, like what are the outcomes that people want when they want to resolve their problems. And that can only happen once we understand how they experience injustice. I mean, we have the stats, and statistics only tell half the story. But what is the human experience that you're trying to address? And I think that's how The Hague can play a huge role. When I did the Hague talk in 2018, I think that was a really powerful moment for me almost, because before that, I was working in Pakistan, so I was defending, I had so many stories of people who I was representing. But the Hague talk that I did, I was able to bring the story of only one of those. It was a survivor of gang rape who I represented. And I felt that that was a really powerful moment. So it was a survivor of gender-based violence who eventually lost her case, and then she decided to just go into hiding. So now, effectively, she's been reduced to a statistic, but not even a statistic, because, I mean, who's collecting the data? But to be able to be in a position where I could tell her story to a group of people, I think for her, in a way, that was quite powerful, because you're almost taking her out of the silence that she's been forced to live her life and have the power so that people know what she went through, and her experience of injustice is not invisible. And I think that was really powerful. And I think we need to do more of that, like bring these stories into these rooms where these decisions are being made. My own personal journey has been quite unique in the sense that I really started off my, almost my career in justice, as you could say, by working at such a local level in direct contact with people. So every time now that I'm in The Hague and I'm part of these conversations that almost seem sometimes too abstract, like having abstract discussions about justice, like having abstract discussions about sustainable development goals and SDG targets, I think that I'm always able to position myself into the shoes of the people that I represented before. And just really that constant reminder, okay, it's for them, that justice is not an abstract context. It's not a, like it's not something that just is like a principle that we need to flesh out and, make these targets. It's really about impacting the lives of so many people all over the world. Stories of survivors of sexual and gender-based violence in Pakistan. Like, I think that for me, that will be the quintessential story of injustice that I always keep coming back to, because that's where I started. I think that would be the story. And I mean, if you look at some of their stories, I mean, even to get to the point where you file a case before the police, you really have experienced so much injustice before that point. So even to make the decision to file a case is something that you have to come to by overcoming so many social and economic barriers. Because, like the second that you experience a moment of sexual and gender-based violence, you're almost sort of tainted by society. So, I mean, the easiest thing to do in that moment would be to become invisible. Because to admit to a violation would also mean that you have to live your life now by being like a symbol of disgrace in so many societies. So I think to take that brave step and file a case before police, like that's such a powerful moment for a lot of these people. But yeah, I mean, that never gets talked about because we only start counting the second that a case is filed before the police, and then this journey that starts like going to the trial, the re-victimization that these survivors of gender-based violence face during court trials. I mean, that's also really harrowing. In a country like Pakistan, the conviction rate is less than 4%. So really very few people are able to get justice by going through the formal justice system. So yeah, I mean, I think that's really the quintessential story of injustice. If you haven't really worked in the field at such a local level, there is also an idea of human rights defenders and lawyers that is such a rewarding and promising work. And I think young people more and more want to go into this field because they think it's some kind, like it will be so rewarding for you. But it's really not, because, I mean, not to paint such a grim picture, but every day of your life, you will experience so much loss and so much failure because, I mean, you're really up against a structurally unequal world. So to stay resilient in the face of that is a huge challenge. It is a difficult journey, but yeah, I think we can, because I mean, you already have so many examples of things that work in local contexts. You have these little moments of victory that create such a huge impact. And I think we really need to identify what those are. So using that kind of evidence of what already works and scaling it up, that's really the pathway that we need to go on to resolve these inequalities.